pass that on.
50 years ago, mankind dared to dream. Space, speed, and size. Apollo, Concorde, and in 1968, the Jumbo Jet.
The first giant 747 is presented to the world.
People thought that an airplane this big just wouldn't fly.
Over 400 seats, nearly 3 times existing airliners.
They bet the company on this airplane.
Pilots call her the Queen of the Skies.
If you're flying a 747, you're flying every pilot's dream.
Symbol of power, beast of burden, and she's carried 5 billion of us across the planet.
Its economy made it possible for everyone to fly.
A 50-year reign. Now sadness as passengers and airlines bid a fond farewell.
I'm gonna miss you, girl.
We are so sad to see her leave.
From its birth to the desert graveyard, cradle to grave, this is the story of the 747. The very last 747 to fly passengers for an American carrier parked up in the Boneyard this year.
This is where the whales come to rest when they're done with their job.
It's just amazing the size of the... I'm on a voyage to uncover how this giant ever got off the ground. So right now, I'm in the wing of a 747. I've been tracking the pioneers that made that very first flight. So this is you on the first flight?
Yes.
I flew some of the test flights on this airplane.
No one said it would be easy.
This had all the earmarks of the Titanic.
And life after flight, the Jumbo Rescue Squad.
It's been reborn as an artist, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Before meeting the 747's creators, meet its fans. At Air Hollywood in LA, they pay up to $440 to board this 747 film set and recreate those first Pan Am jumbo flights to London.
Pan Am had this vision for this giant aircraft, and it revolutionized the way we still fly today. Here, we celebrate the magnificent era of that aircraft and everything that made it so special. And we will recreate the experience in explicit detail of flying on a Pan Am 747.
Also on board tonight at 71, a stewardess from the 747's very first flight.
Every passenger on board felt like they were a pioneer or an explorer.
And your uniform still fits.
Barely.
That's amazing. This is the incredible luxury people enjoyed on those early 747s, but there was also a revolution going on behind the curtain in economy.
What the 747 did was make it affordable for people to travel across the globe.
The founder of Pan Am, Juan Trippe, had a vision.
So this was the 747 named after my father, Juan T. Trippe. We're christening the first Pan Am 747 to come off the line.
Do you remember this?
It was a magnificent day.
What did your father want to achieve with the 747?
He believed in the 747 that would be an opportunity to really develop new markets where people could fly for much lower fares.
Conveniently, Trippe's best friend was the boss at Boeing, Bill Allen.
They were close friends. They would go off on these fishing trips, two old friends saying, all right, you build it, I'll buy it if you build it. 2.5 times larger than anything that ever been built or flown before. It was a huge airplane.
Boeing set about turning that vision into an aircraft.
This plane was so big that Boeing bet the company. And here in the United States, we call them the greatest generation. They came through the Depression. They lived that hard life. They fought the war. They had been tested. They believed that they could do anything.
Pan Am's Juan Trippe insisted there be 2 decks.
People could come to him and say, we can't add a second level to this airplane. And he had this expression, well, don't you see? And he'd start in, well, don't you see if we did this? And he would wear people down.
And he got what he wanted. Revolution, not evolution. The Giant was born.
Huge. It was breathtaking. We stepped into the plant, and in front of us was this monstrous 747. Can't repeat what everybody says when they first take a look at this airplane. It was a massive wake-up call.
September 30th, 1968. The first Giant 747 is presented to the world.
Dad was thrilled when the 747 was an actual reality.
A world launch, but few knew it still couldn't fly. Today, that very first 747 rests at Seattle's Museum of Flight. So these represented people for the weight. Barry Latta worked on board as a test engineer.
Carrying 350 people around the sky, you didn't want to put one in the ground. Everything was duplicated for safety.
There are still people that say it's not going to fly, and quite literally, that the airplane is not going to get off the ground. And going forward to that first flight, Bill Allen says to our chief test pilot, he says, the company's riding on this, and so don't screw it up. And he's like, gee, thanks, Mr. Allen.
Hey, Paul, let me know when to release brakes.
The brakes were released, and the airplane started to roll down the runway. Lots of spray. We saw it disappear almost into a spray. It was tense for everybody because you really needed to know, will this thing fly? I was involved with the power plant systems, and we had a lot of concerns there relative to whether the engine would stay lit.
Everything looks very normal on the right side.
Being so big, it looked slow. When it came back to land, we looked at it, and I think all of us had the feeling, my God, what kind of speed is he flying at?
To help allay public fears of flying this giant, test pilots dressed casually. No jumpsuits.
That thing is just ridiculously easy to fly. It's just a pilot's dream.
It's hard to imagine, but when this was first rolled out, there was a fear that she'd end up more Cinderella than Queen of the Skies.
Rotate.
Only 2 months after the 747 first flew, the British and French tested their vision of the future. Concorde, traveling twice the speed of sound.
At this time, aviation's at a crossroads. Can we all enjoy the supersonic speed of getting to our destinations quickly, or will we be traveling with 450 others? So nobody knew at this time, but the race was on.
If supersonic won that battle, Boeing had built the hump into the jumbo's nose so it could be turned into a lowly freighter. But Concorde faced a barrage of American environmental and business lobbies.
So with the final scorecard tallied, over 1,500 747s were built, and only 14 Concordes saw service with British Airways and Air France. So you be the judge.
28 airlines signed up for the 747.
362 passengers.
They'll need new airports to take care of these.
Man, how are they ever going to get that thing in the air?
And what to do with all those passengers.
Airports themselves can't as yet cope with huge numbers of passengers suddenly descending on them.
And I remember as a crew walking step by step, looking up at that aircraft, and the closer we got, the bigger it got, and thinking, how are we going to do this?
Seats as far as you could see. It was very frightening, as in, to start that. Yeah. Every country you went to, crowds standing, watching it come in.
As test flights and tours created jumbo mania, Britain's BOAC, later to become British Airways, sent their man Hugh Dibley to America to learn how to fly a jumbo. There were no simulators, just the real thing.
I think about 10 of us on the flight deck watching this, and you have no idea for the first landing how high you are up on the ground. It really was like landing a block of flats. They thought they were landing when they were over the beginning of the runway. The wheels were still over the grass. Yes, it was very nice to be able to look down on the peasants and the mini jets below.
As Hugh grappled with his flying block of flats, designers got to work on ocean liner style interiors in every color.
The size and scope of this airplane allowed the size of people's imaginations to grow. The imaginations of the designers went wild, and it was not only upstairs, the lounge where they could do this, but they could go downstairs, this giant cargo hold, and turn that into a lounge area. And so you had these wonderful ideas like the Tiger Lounge, where you have the spiral staircase going down and these wild fabrics and mirrors and shag carpeting.
It's a race for luxury that continues on big jets to this day. There were even new treats in economy. Movies were in and fares were down. It was Pan Am that made the world's inaugural 747 flight from New York to London. It certainly didn't go to plan. I've been tracing the crew and finally tracked Elise to Oslo in Norway.
Amazing to meet you.
So this is you on the first flight?
Yes, just after landing in London, and me between the captains.
Does it still fit?
Yes. See it?
But the glitz of that very first flight was tarnished by those troublesome jet engines.
Something happened for takeoff. One of the engines heated up. Some people said they had seen flames. Maybe they did, or imagined. But the captain decided to go back to the terminal.
The world's press watched the world's biggest jet return.
Disappointed?
Well, sure.
On the tarmac, Pan Am's Ron Marasco.
There was a state of shock throughout the facility. This was our worst nightmare.
Any sense of fear?
No, I mean, they said something was burning and we got off.
A man-made giant crossing the Atlantic. Cynics had heard that before.
And there were people outside who were demonstrating that this had all the earmarks of the Titanic.
Some people even went off the airplane and said, never again. They never came back. I think it was about 30 passengers who didn't want to go back.
When we inspected the engine, there was molten metal in the tailpipe.
Hidden away, the only other 747 was secretly swapped.
We arrived at the hangar. The painters had just finished stenciling the name of the original departure aircraft, Clipper Young America.
7 hours late, paint still wet. They tried again.
It was very, very, very quiet when it took off.
Do you think people were nervous?
So of course, it's always a new thing. So we decided to start serving champagne. And our purser told us, hey ladies, come on, keep serving champagne. They won't know, even if you're up in the air or on the ground.
They landed safely. Today, those early engine problems might have grounded the fleet. Back then, the size of the 747 made better headlines than its glitches.
Oh, I think one heart aches, and one thinks back to the days that we had such great times, and it allowed so many people to fly all over the world.
The 747, 50 years and counting.
It was the queen of the sky, but it also was the mother of everything that followed it.
I still feel like a pioneer.
She was a classy, elegant lady.
Everything looks very normal on the right.
What this wonderful machine did, I just feel like home in here.
When we pause and look up at the sky and see the 747, we can say, when we're at our best, that's what we can achieve.